Okay, so this is just talking about the data analysis. So I'm still on the method and data analysis slide, and I'm on slide 17, which is where the data analysis section starts. So now it's the title slide, so I'm going to switch to slide 18. And so slide 18 is essentially telling you what your assignment is. So we collected data, right? You all submitted your data to me. I put all the data of all the participants, aka all the students in the class, into one Excel file. I didn't give you data on gender and age. Again, you're just going to make it up for this class. But I am giving you the data so that way you can analyze it and see what the results are. So the data is not necessarily in the format where you can just plug it into SPSS and analyze it. So you will have to recode it into SPSS, but that should be relatively easy with the copy-paste feature. So really quickly, just thinking before I get into what analysis you should do, let's think about what analyses should you do if you were just given or you were designing a study that was with two independent variables, each with two levels, and one dependent measure, which is one score of overall competency, is the average of all of the competency scores. So what analyses do you think that you would run? So you can feel free to pause this and just think about it for a minute. You kind of going through your file drawer of what you learned in either Psych 200 or Stat 200 might be highly beneficial for you just to help you detect. But I'm going to move on to the next slide, which reveals it. So if you really want to test yourself before just knowing it, just pause this video right now. So moving on to slide 19. So the best type of analysis in our case, where you have two independent variables, each with two levels, and one dependent variable, sorry, that should say one DV, is a two-way ANOVA, specifically a 2x2 within subjects repeated ANOVA because we used a within subjects design. And so your table that you might envision if you ever did an ANOVA by hand might be something like this. This would be an ANOVA table where you have your independent variable 1 on top and your independent variable 2 on the side, and you have each of your two levels creating 4 boxes, right? And so you have the no blazer and the secretary, no blazer and CEO, blazer and secretary, and blazer and CEO. So you have 4 boxes that you need to fill in. And essentially what you do is you go down to get these scores, you go into the Excel file and you take the average of each of those conditions, right? So for example, in the data file, I believe it is column B is the no blazer secretary or no blazer assistant, I think it is. And so what you essentially do is go down all through column B and you take the average. And that average is the score that goes into that box. And you do the same for all 4 conditions. And so you're going to have 4 averages in there. And an ANOVA doesn't just look for an interaction between your two independent variables and your dependent variable. It also looks for main effects. So you actually get 3 pieces of information from the ANOVA. Whether you have a main effect for independent variable 1, whether you have a main effect for independent variable 2, and whether there's an interaction between the two independent variables, right? And you should remember this from stats. If you don't, you might want to look up ANOVA or two-way ANOVA just to help you understand, because the output that we're going to be going over next week might be really confusing if you don't remember going over ANOVAs, specifically two-way ANOVAs where you can look for interactions. So that's on you. For you to do if you're not familiar with the two-way ANOVA. But just really quickly, the gist, a main effect for, let's say, your first independent variable, attire, is looking at, regardless of the job description, right, was there a main difference between participants' evaluation of competency, whether somebody was wearing a blazer or not, right? Regardless of whether they were secretary or CEO, was their attire alone causing them to have different scores, right? And then, main effect 2 will be for the independent variable 2, which is job description, right? So regardless of whether they wore blazers or not, was there an overall difference in competency score depending on whether somebody was said to be a CEO or said to be a secretary, right? Regardless of their attire. So that means, is there a main effect for attire? Is there a main effect for job description, right? And then the ANOVA also tells us if there's an interaction. So it's difficult without scores on there, but we'll talk about it when we talk about the results section. But an interaction essentially says, is there a significant difference between how the results of independent variable 1 depend on the level of independent variable 2. So again, this will make much more sense when we talk about the results section. So we'll leave that here. And if you need a refresher on ANOVA, now is the time. So essentially, I gave you the data file, and your job is to put it into SPSS and analyze it. If you're having any trouble with that, I know SPSS is expensive, although I think that there's a 30 or 60-day trial that's free. There are other websites that can run two-way ANOVAs online if you calculate the averages using Excel, which you can do. So your homework for this would be to submit your data analysis that you conducted for the data that I provided you. Okay, so that's it for this section, super quick, and then the last video and then this video round up our method and data analysis lecture. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to help.